Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Caylus, which is a 2 to 5 player worker placement board game designed by William Attia and published by Astari Games. This one was printed way back in 2005 and takes around 2 hours to play on average. So this is actually the original version of the game. However, this game has been re-implemented by Caylus 1303, which I have not played and I cannot testify the differences between the two. But I always wanted to try this original one because this is considered to be quite an iconic and influential design, and considered to be one of the first worker placement games. So the game is going to look like this when it's set up, where you have this big board here, and in the top left hand corner of this board you have the castle, which is going to be one of the main factors of the game, because one of the main ways you get points is by donating to the castle, by trading in resources to get victory points, and the earlier you do that in the earlier phases, you get more points based than if you do it later. You've got this little King's Favour track here, which can give you little bonuses as you crawl up, such as getting victory points, money, resources, or even discounts on different buildings. You also have all these different worker placement spots you can go to, which follow a kind of track. So you've got these kind of special buildings here which never get covered up and they never change. You've got the bridge here which will determine player order when it comes to it, which we'll touch on shortly. And during setup, these pink buildings have been randomly shuffled and put into the first 6 spots here. And these are all pretty simple worker placement spots, which, you know, if you play a lot of worker placement games, this is going to sound, you know, quite a common theme, where you just put your worker down on these and you'll end up getting resources. You've got a number of different resources in this game. I think there's 5 different types with slightly different variances on how rare they are. You know, for example, I think these food cubes here, these pinky ones, are quite common, but the yellow ones, the gold ones, become quite rare and are worth quite a few points at the end of the game. And there are also different types of buildings. So not only you've got the resource ones, you've got ones like this, which will let you build new buildings, which we'll touch on shortly. And even ones like this, where you can trade in any resources for money. And money is quite a tight factor in this game. You can also see that there are 2 white pieces on the main track here. And these are going to have quite an influential part of the game and can impact what people will do. So the first one here, this bailiff cylinder, is simply going to be a kind of a countdown or a timer to the game, because every round he's going to move 1 or 2 spaces, which will trigger scoring once it hits these different spots. So you've got the 3 different parts, or the 3 different scoring phases, and after the 3rd phase, when the bailiff reaches this spot, then the game is going to end after the final scoring is calculated, and that is where you're going to have a look at who's donated the most to the castle here. And depending on how much people have donated, you're going to get different bonuses or even punishments. So you can see here in the first scoring phase, if you've got at least 2 donations to the castle, then you're going to get a little bonus of a King's Favour, which will give you a little boon on this track here. But if you don't donate anything, you can lose 2 points, and that applies to the middle scoring. Again, the more buildings you get built, the more scoring you get, and if you don't build anything, you're going to lose more and more points. Okay, if I didn't make it clear, then the objective of this game is to get as many victory points as you can. And the game is going to play out over multiple rounds, and each of those rounds is going to get divided into 7 different phases. The first phase is ultra simple, where you're going to take 2 coins, or at least start with by taking 2 coins as income from the supply. And there are ways to increase that income, because money is quite a tight resource in this game and you need it to do pretty much everything. But once everybody's done that phase, you're going to go into the main kind of part of the game, which is where you are going to be placing your workers onto the different spots. So the different thing about this game that differs to a lot of other worker placement games out there now is that when you place your worker on these different spots, let's say I did this here, you always have to pay a coin, or at least 1 coin to do so. That can get higher depending on if other people have passed before you, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But additionally, you do not get the rewards instantly. You have to wait until a later phase until these are resolved, because things can change in the interim. But let's talk about what some more of these spots do. So you've got this little bridge one here, this gate tile. And basically what this means is that if you go here, then after all the different spots have been taken, and it comes to a later phase to these spots being resolved, you can use this to activate any unclaimed tile. Now that might sound like a bit of a waste of time if you don't know what comes later, but we'll touch on that very shortly. This one here just simply gets you 3 coins from the bank. This one here ties more into this spot here, where this is going to move this provost disc here. Now the provost is a bit of a nagging tension in this game, because when somebody when this spot here is resolved, then whoever is on that spot gets to move this provost 1 to 3 spaces in either direction, up or down the track here. Now this is a massive factor of the game, because any building that is activated after the provost is completely void. They are not going to get to take that action. This spot here lets you trade in a coin and a blue cube to get one of these king's favors to climb up these tracks here. This one here is going to be for turn order, because turn order is quite a big factor of this game, because the different spots get gobbled up very quickly. This one here is the inn. Now this is quite a cool spot, because normally, as I mentioned earlier, whenever you take a worker placement spot, you have to spend a coin to the bank. However, if somebody passes after they've deployed the amount of workers they want to, they're going to take the first spot here like this and claim a coin. Now that means that every worker placed after that is going to have to spend 2 coins per worker they deploy. Or even if somebody else passes after that, then this player is going to have to spend 3 coins per deployment they make. So again, the longer you take, and if people pass before you, it gets more and more expensive. But the inn basically means that if you control the inn, then it's always going to cost you 1 coin no matter what. So it's a great contingency plan to always pay the minimum. These ones here are very self-explanatory, where you take the resources. And this one here is going to be build new buildings, particularly a wood building, so it's like a carpenter spot. Now, when this spot comes to resolving, you can build any of these wooden tiles here, these brown ones, and add them onto the board. Now, these all have another benefit on them and offer victory points, that top right-hand number there, and will cost you additional resources. So you can see this one here costs you a pink and a brown cube, but it will let you build this kind of stonemason tile and add it onto the board as a new worker placement spot. So this one's going to allow you to build these grey buildings, which will give you more victory points and even more output. So it gets you a whole lot of resources with a single placement, and can even unlock this gold resource, which is going to be worth, I think they're 3 points each at the end of the game. There's some more different buildings here, such as trading in money for victory points and so on. Now there's also another option to build these residential buildings by going to this spot here. So I think this is the lawyer spot. Now, when you go to that spot, once of course it's already on the board, you are going to be able to build one of these residential buildings either on an existing building of yours or onto one of these neutral pink buildings. Now, when you do that, you are going to cover up the spot, meaning that nobody else can go there, but also put one of your buildings on it, like so, just to show it's yours, and that will increase your income each round. So now this player is going to be worth 3 coins for every income phase. Something that's also worth mentioning is that when a building is built, so let's just say again the yellow player built this one here, and not only are they going to get those points instantly, but also if anybody else ever uses that building, so let's just say the green player went here on a later turn, then the yellow player, because they built this building in the first place, is always going to get a victory point. So you've got to be quite careful about using that again and again, because people are going to benefit and profit off that placement. Now the stone buildings, not only do they offer you a victory point if somebody else uses your building, but they also get you an additional resource. You can see here, this woodland tile is going to get you either an additional wood or one of these food tokens. Furthermore, this architect tile is going to let you replace any residential buildings, which are those house ones which up your income, into one of these blue landmark tokens. I forget what they're called. And again, some of them will give you more income, but most of them will just give you a big chunk of victory points because they are quite costly. Another worker placement spot you can go to is to the castle. And when you do that, you're going to put your cube or your cylinder on the first available spot there. Now that does mean that multiple people can go to the church. However, it will be resolved in that order. So the green player will have opportunity to build first. Now, when you go here, you're going to have to spend 3 different resources, one of which is going to be one of the pink cubes. And as I mentioned earlier, you are going to put your house on that location. This would of course be the green player, but I've only got the yellow houses here. And going to get these points instantly. Now, additionally, the person who built the most houses each round is going to get a little favour by going up the king's track. And if there's a tie on who's built the most houses, then it's going to be the person who deployed first. Now, on top of all that, if you ever choose to place a worker on the castle spot there, and you do not have the resources to contribute to the castle because maybe you overestimated yourself or you got caught off guard by the provost, then you are actually going to lose a victory point. In fact, you're going to lose 2 victory points. Now, something I also didn't mention is that when you start to resolve these different buildings and you get to the bridge area, in the order in which players pass, they're going to have an extra opportunity to move the provost. And each player, again in order, so starting with the yellow player, is going to have the opportunity to spend up to 3 coins, 1 to 3 coins, in order to move the provost 1 to 3 spaces, however they see fit. Maybe the yellow player had a worker here, they really wanted this spot, so they're going to spend that extra 3 coins to try and push it further this way, so they haven't wasted this placement. However, if you pass earlier, you are going to be a bit more at the mercy of the other players, because they're going to have the opportunity to push it back down. So after you've taken your income, you've placed your workers, you've resolved the special buildings, you've moved the provost, resolved the other buildings, and then resolved building the castles, and I should say you can do this multiple times if you have the resources to do it. Then at the end of the turn is going to be triggered, where the bailiff is going to move either 1 or 2 spaces. So if the provost is on the left-hand side of the bailiff, then it's only going to move 1 space, but if it's on the right-hand side of the bailiff, then it's going to move or the provost, sorry, it's going to move 2 spaces. So again, that can kind of dictate the pace of the play and can actually play quite a big part. Okay, so let's get into some thoughts on Caylus. So I'm going to start off with some basic mechanical things in the game. So first up, I do actually quite like the way that this game uses this more like a programming worker placement system, rather than you simply placing your worker onto a spot and instantly getting the reward. You are kind of thinking more ahead, because sometimes, like, for example, the carpenter spot here might resolve before you actually get the resources you need for that carpenter spot in the first place. So it's not like you can get the resources here and then go to here after and then build the building. You need to consider about the way and order these things are resolved, which adds a kind of a new dimension to the game. And to be honest, I've been caught off guard with this more than once, where I'm just kind of in that default mindset where I think, I'm going to have the resources, so this is going to resolve, I'm going to have it, where in reality, I've simply done it in the wrong order. So it's just a small little wrinkle there that will keep you on your toes. And that also ties into the castle donations, because you want to be putting your worker down here pretty quickly, because you're going to reserve that first spot and give yourself a better chance of claiming the king's favour, which is quite a significant part of the game and can give you a hell of a lot of rewards if you keep on winning the majorities here. So again, you want to be getting here first in order to do that, because quite often you'll all be contributing the same amount, if any. But if you end up going here but not actually getting the rewards in the first place, or the resources you need, then that can actually end up costing you victory points. And it all ties back to the uncertainty of the provost, because you might think, all these resource spots that I need are right on the edge of the provost here. I might be safe, but in reality, in actuality, the other players might be almost conspiring against you and investing either their time into going to the provost spot here, or when it gets to resolving on the bridge, to push that provost way past you and to completely almost throw your plans under the bus. I think this provost mechanism is going to be somewhat polarising to a lot of people. You're either going to love it, or you are going to probably not like it so much. Now, I will say, generally speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of ultra-confrontational or spiteful mechanisms in games, and to be honest, this does kind of align to that. It's certainly not a pleasant experience being cut off by the other players and having wasted your placements because of the movement of that provost. But there are actually other things to consider here. I mean, my game group generally don't like that style of gameplay anyway. We won't deliberately try to do things to ruin your plans. However, there were certain times in the game that I did quite enjoy the way this worked, because if, say for example, I was the blue player here, and it came to my turn to moving the provost, I might just choose to spend a coin or 2 just to push it further along this way, almost detract, or to try and make it less inviting for the other players to spend all that additional money just to make you cost you 1 worker. They might have been incentivized to do it if it was just the 1 coin, but if they're going to have to spend so much, then they're probably not going to do it anyway. So yes, it can be ultra cutthroat if you want to play that way, but it doesn't really have to be, and it can be used as a kind of thread of tension throughout the game, rather than directly spiteful to the other players. I do like the way that the castle scoring works, because you are always under pressure to donate as much as you can, because there are limited spots at the higher point values, but also you want to be constantly competing to get that king's favour there, because if you keep on letting the same people win again and again, they are going to quickly start gaining points that you just have almost no way to catch back up on. So that is a really cool idea. And again, it adds the extra tension of wanting to do things by certain checkpoints in the game. If it gets to each scoring phase and you've not really done your work, you've not put enough effort into donating to the castle, then that can cost you a hell of a lot of points. And you want to be putting buildings down anyway, not only for the points in the first place, but also because you're going to get these extra boons by donating more and more. The money in this game is fascinating because it's such a tight and hard to manage resource, because you need money to do pretty much everything. Of course, you need it with every single worker placement spot. You're going to need it to take other additional costs in terms of converting money into cubes. You're going to want it as a contingency to move the provost and so on. So again, managing that money as efficient as you can and making sure you're not wasting it is a big part of the game. And it even makes these other kind of money gaining spots very sought after, because again, money is going to be the backbone of everything that you do. But I do enjoy the fact that you can actually build up a little bit of an engine by establishing these residential buildings, which will increase your income each round, which can really pay off long term. On top of all those other interesting things we've already discussed, I think my favourite part of the game, believe it or not, might be the passing mechanism. So I love the fact that when somebody passes, not only are they going to get the extra coin, it's going to start ramping up the costs for other people to continue what they're doing. And you can actually really catch the other players off guard quite a lot with this, because maybe they've got some plans in order that they wanted to do, and maybe they've already put a worker down on the on the castle, and they still have several placements to go before they get the resources in order to contribute to that in the first place. And the fact that you've passed just means they're going to start bleeding money faster and faster. Maybe it's going to cost them 3 coins with every single placement, which can be absolutely crippling in terms of your finances. And that just makes the other spots even more inviting by, being first in the turn order. Or even this spot here in particular, where if you invest in this spot, then no matter when you pass, then you're always going to be spending 1 coin, which is such a huge advantage to have. Now, I also love the fact that if you have established a building by building it, then no matter when people have passed, if you use your own building, it's only ever going to cost you, in fact, that's a residential building, but if you use your own building, there's only ever going to cost you 1 coin rather than what it would normally cost by the passing order here. The building mechanism of, building the board as you go, creating new worker spots for other people, but gaining an advantage if other people go to that spot, is almost like a tried and tested design point that a lot of games have used. And to be honest, I've never not liked it when a game uses this mechanism. It's such a nice and passive way to introduce player interaction into the game. Is it worth you constantly giving other players that bonus by utilising the spot they've built? So I do really like the way that works. Yeah, you are creating opportunities for other people to go there and get more resources, but you know what, maybe you're going to use your own building and get the advantage of that later down the road. And of course, even if you don't, you're going to keep on taking an income of points and even get the initial points from building the building in the first place. So you're always incentivized to keep building things in order to keep the game developed and keep the the spots open and keep the game ticking along. And despite the game constantly offering you new opportunities by placing more tiles on the board, it still manages to maintain its tightness as the game goes on, because of course, as the game goes on, people are going to start building these residential buildings which will cover up the initial spots. So even though the output of these tiles might be increased, there is still the limited availability of each resource, meaning that every single placement is paramount to the order you want to do things. How are you going to prioritize everything? This is one of those examples of a game or worker placement games doing worker placement right, where every single spot is inviting, and that turn angst of wanting to get to the spot that you want is so agonizing at times. I think initially the phase structure can seem a bit overwhelming. You have 7 phases, but after a few turns of playing through, it is actually remarkably intuitive. Simply take your income, do the worker placement, resolve the worker placement, do the castle, and then you're pretty much good to go for the next phase. Now, that being said, the game is on the longer side of Euros that I tend to enjoy. It's pushing beyond my comfort level, kind of going toward that 2-hour mark. Now, I don't think that's unreasonable for a game like this, because it does have a hell of a lot of depth. There's a lot of decisions from start to finish. It's an engaging design. But to be honest, I do consciously and would actively encourage you, especially if you're running the game, to keep the game moving along. Just encouraging people to be as quick as they can. Of course, not rushing them, but just consciously making an effort to keep the forward momentum going, because if you start really mulling over your turns, it can start taking a bit too long. I think Caylus scales pretty well, and my sweet spot for this game is definitely 3 players, which is kind of a generic standpoint I have on most heavier style Euros. 2 players works fine. The only thing you have to consider is that there is no, manipulatable player order. 4 players, I could be convinced to play out. I would be conscious that I wanted quicker players because I wouldn't want it to start pushing towards that 3-hour mark. I think that's going to be a bit overkill for me personally. Well, 5 players, I will say that I wouldn't really ever consider bringing it out because it's going to be a bit too long for me personally. But yeah, that 2 to 4 player count is okay for me, particularly the 3 player count. When it comes to the production of Caylus, you're going to fall into one of 2 camps. Either you're going to instantly be put off and know that this game isn't for you because it looks too bland, it looks too boring and too beige, and you're going to want something a little bit more colourful and visually stimulating. Or alternatively, you're going to be like myself and you're going to instantly know what you're going to get into. You kind of start to learn to trust games that look like this. And to be honest, you start to love games that look like this, where it's all, it's all steak and no sizzle. When it comes to the physical production, there's absolutely no issues whatsoever. The tile quality is more than adequate. You've got your standard wooden discs, your wooden houses and things that you've seen in so many other Euros. And there's no real flaws in the actual physical physical pieces. The money's fine. The cubes and resources are simple, your standard wooden Euro cubes, but you could choose to upgrade them if you wanted to. Okay, so let's get into some final thoughts on Caylus. So I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this has always been a bit of a bucket list style game for me. Most people advocate this game who like the style of games that I do. However, I will always kind of hesitant to get it played or to pick it up myself because generally speaking, I don't like worker placement games, or at least I'm not excited by worker placement games where the worker placement is the main aspect of the game. I normally like them when they're part of a bigger picture or a different style of game. It's not a mechanism I'm opposed to, it's just something that doesn't really excite me too much. But it's fascinating to me that this game is 17 years old. And despite that, I don't think that any game since then, probably hundreds of them by now, I don't think any of them have improved upon this style of worker placement game where you're placing your workers down, collecting resources, and then trading them in for other things. There's so many finely tuned things about this game that I think is so well done. I touched on before, the passing mechanism is excellent. Love the way that works. I love the tension of wanting to get to every single spot, and when you do anything, you're missing out on something else, which again is another must-have essential part of a worker placement game for me. I don't like it when there's too much openness and everything is too generous. This completely throws it out of the water and makes it as tight as can be. That mixed with the tightness of the resources, the tightness of the money, investing in new buildings, that trade-off of giving other people points for buildings. Oh, what a fantastic design this one is, and I was left feeling very, very impressed by it. I've really been mulling over how I'm going to rate this game. Mechanically, there really isn't anything I can improve upon. It does work like clockwork, and it's just a completely sound and excellent design. That being said, the game does take a little bit longer than I usually like for Euros to take. I do need to make sure that I'm in the right headspace, and not only for the amount of time and effort it's going to cost and the kind of mental capacity, because it is quite a draining game because you need to be switched on from start to finish. But also the fact that it has a layer of interaction here, especially the conflict style nature and almost the spiteful style nature, that I need to be in the right headspace and in the right mood to engage with. Now, I can get past it because I think it's such a pivotal part of the game, an important and even fun part of the game. But again, I still need to be in that right headspace to fully immerse myself and throw myself in, with 2 feet. But despite those things, I don't think I can avoid giving this one an elite shield. It's just such a fantastic design, one that's ultimately stood the test of time beyond hundreds of worker placement games and is still right at the forefront of those designs. If you like your dry Euros, you don't mind getting the claws out and just a simple kind of convert cubes to other cubes and get victory points, then if you like that style of game, I have no doubt that you're going to enjoy Caylus.